your flesh and blood.
Welcome to Tell Me Your Story, new paradigms for a new world where we're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We are here 9 times a week, Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m., and Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m., streaming live at all those times at richarddugan.com. We are on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, as well as YouTube, where you can watch these conversations. I hope that you will take time to subscribe and click notifications so that when a new conversation is posted, you'll be notified and you'll be able to tune in, listen in, and learn, be entertained and inspired. A reminder that Choices, which is my book, 5 Steps for Life, it's available on Amazon.com in paperback, hardcover, and Kindle with Audible, soon to be released. We also ask that if you can support the work that we are doing financially, we do have a PayPal account. It is there for your security as well as ours. And when they ask for an email address to whom you're sending, please go to richard@richarddugan.com. That's the email address. If you go to richarddugan.com, there is also a link directly to PayPal so that you can send us whatever support you can. And we thank you to those who have helped and to those who will help. We also ask that you take time during this decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, to go within to that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place and listen to that still, small voice. And with that, we now take you to our very special interview and guest here on Tell Me Your Story. And welcome to Tell Me Your Story. I am Reverend Dr. D. Richard Dugan here along with Michael Guillén. He is joining us to talk about something that is seen but not seen, or is not seen but seen. And we're going to talk about that, the invisible everywhere, among other things. Michael, it is, first of all, great to have you with us. And just so you know, this will be a good interview because my younger brother's name is Michael also. So it's kind of like talking to him too. So thank you for being with us.
That's great, Richard. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you for having me on your wonderful show. God bless you. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Now, the website, folks, is theinvisibleeverywhere.com. That's the website, theinvisibleeverywhere.com. Now, we will start here because this is all a matter of faith, all right? In spite of what maybe science has shown us over the decades and centuries, for that matter, that there's a passage in the New Testament, for example, where Jesus basically, he's challenged by some folks who are basically saying, well, show us this and show us that so we will believe. And he said, hey, okay, sure. Great that you believe because you see what I'm showing you. But blessed are those who have not seen and yet believe. Your story kind of starts with that premise, because at one point, and bear in mind, I've had atheists on this program who I have found to be some of the most spiritual individuals that I have ever met. They have a moral compass, but they don't necessarily have a faith or belief in something that they can't see. So talk to us about your transition. You weren't born an atheist. You must have gotten that from somewhere.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, Richard. I fell madly in love with science in the 2nd grade. I was, born in East Los Angeles. My dad was a journeyman carpenter. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. So there was nothing remarkable about my family, and I had never met a scientist in my life, but for whatever reason, I just fell head over heels in love with science in the 2nd grade. And I lived by the motto, seeing is believing. If I can't see it, I'm not going to believe it. I also live by the motto, prove it. If you can't prove it to me, I'm not going to believe it either. So it wasn't really until I got to grad school many, many years later at Cornell, where I earned a PhD in physics, math, and astronomy, that I discovered how wrong I was. That first of all, let's take the seeing is believing bit. Well, I learned that, and to this day it's true, that 95% of the observable universe is invisible, which is kind of ironic because you're calling it the observable universe, but 95% of it is absolutely invisible to us. It's in the form of dark matter and dark energy. But it doesn't even stop there, Richard, because beyond the observable universe, there's an unobservable universe, and we can get into that if you want. But there's an unobservable universe beyond what we call the cosmic horizon that is 100% invisible to us. So I had to really ditch my seeing is believing motto, because otherwise, how can I live by the motto seeing is believing if I can't see most of the universe? And more than that, I think now that I'm older, I have discovered, and these are discoveries given to me by science, my beautiful beloved science, that we inhabit a mostly invisible universe, and we are inhabited by a mostly invisible universe. And that's why I called my movie The Invisible Everywhere, literally, because we are immersed in invisible realms. So I talk about that in the movie. The other motto, Prove It, was interesting because what I discovered by the time I was in my young 20s is that the whole notion of proof, and it would take us hours to get into it. I talk about it in my book, Believing is Seen, which inspired the movie, by the way. But the whole concept of proof is overrated. Let's begin with science. Science cannot prove its main theories. Einstein, I think, said it very well when he said, that no amount of experimentation can ever prove me right. A single experiment can prove me wrong. Now, this is a man who had a lot of skin in the game. He had two major theories, the theory of special relativity and the theory of general relativity. But even he recognized that science cannot prove theories. The best we can ever say is that the theories that science proposes is consistent with the best available evidence. But what I discovered is that given the best available evidence, there's always more than one interpretation allowed. So you can interpret the very same evidence a number of ways, and this is where people have disagreements. So I had to ditch the old prove it thing, because I also realized that, you know what? I had to have faith in the scientific method in order to be a scientist. Look, I can't prove to you that the scientific method is a reliable way to find the most profound truths in the universe. It's just something we take on faith. And I had to take it on faith in order to be a scientist. So that, in a nutshell, in a few minutes, was the course of my life. And this movie really traces my journey from atheism to believing in God, and basically shows how science itself shattered my atheism and opened my eyes to the existence of God. That's it in a nutshell.
You know, it's interesting too, because even as a person of faith myself, born and raised in the Roman Catholic traditions, with my first wife, was introduced to the Byzantine rite of the Catholic Church, both, from my perspective, very beautiful. I love the tradition, the ritual, the ceremony, and so forth. But to be totally honest, I am an agnostic person of faith or metaphysician. Agnostic because I don't know. I believe,
Mhm.
and I kind of adhere to what Greg Braden said on this program some time ago when we were talking about his book, The Healing Power of Belief. He said that today we believe, but one day we will know. Now,
Yes.
what day that will be, we have no idea. But that's one of the reasons why. And to just bring you in on the loop here, I worked for 15 years for a Christian radio station back in the 80s and early 90s at the height of televangelism, and that is not where we're coming from, certainly. But what I found so fascinating was the certainty with which people would express their positions. And I remember someone sharing with me something that I can't remember exactly what the conversation was, but they said, well, you know, Richard, it's better to begin in doubt and end in certainty than to begin in certainty and end in doubt. And when we talk about this issue of believing is seeing, or having a belief in something, having a faith in something that you can't see, that you can't really prove, I find it fascinating how There will be those, and there was a gentleman when my wife and I lived in Santa Barbara. He would stand on the corner where the Natural History Museum was there on State Street in Santa Barbara, and he would be promoting and giving away these DVDs, these discs of supposedly the finding of the Noah's Ark up on Mount Ararat. And the only conclusion I could come to with that, and anybody else who wants to prove, what they believe, is to say, well, then yours isn't a philosophy of belief; it's a philosophy of fact. And I said that those are diametrically opposed. You cannot use the science that you condemn for talking about the age of the earth being so many billions of years old, on and on and on and on, and turn around and use that same science to justify and verify your philosophy. Again, I'm an agnostic. I don't know. And I'm not here to undermine anybody's philosophy, their beliefs, if you will, their faith. If it works for you, my God, please continue. But also we encourage you to continue to do some searching and researching. I'd like to ask you a little bit about when you discovered a particular element that we promote on this station, and that has to do with that still small voice, or that intuition, if you will, that inner guidance. We promote it in the context of the Decade of Perfect Vision, started out with 2020, the year, and having people go within to listen to and follow the promptings of that still small voice. Do you recall your first experience, or at least the awareness of that first experience, when you started hearing or being aware of consciously a guidance, a divine, if you will, power, if you will, maybe not power, power may not be the right word, but I mean, I refer to mine as my friend, because I tend to agree with, I don't know if it was Carl Sagan or Stephen Hawking who said that this is a friendly universe. It's not out to get us. It doesn't mean that things don't happen, but it's a friendly universe. Talk to us about that aspect of how you have gotten to where you are today, and then of course creating this incredible documentary called "The Invisible Everywhere."
Well, you have said so many deep things, Richard. I wish we had a long time to talk about them, but
We'll
let me
have you
answer
back.
your.
We'll have you back.
Yeah, great. Yeah, no, because I'm listening to you, and wow, there's so many things I want to say in reply, but let me answer your most immediate question about the still small voice. You have to understand that when I fell in love with science, I didn't just fall in love with a discipline. That discipline became my God. So I lived and breathed, ate and slept science. It was everything. It was my God. And when I got to Cornell, I became a scientific monk, by which I mean that I worked 20 hours a day in my basement lab of the Lab of Nuclear Studies. I didn't know if it was day or night because there were no windows. I worked 7 days a week. I barely groomed myself, no social life, etc. I talk about that in the movies. And I'm telling you that because you have to understand that for me, God just wasn't on my radar. It wasn't like I was one of those hostile atheists. I was just so all consumed by science. It was my everything.
Mm-hmm.
It really wasn't until so the idea of hearing from God, the still small voice, that would be a foreign concept to me for most of my young life. It really wasn't until my 40s that I would say I had that kind of experience that you're talking about. It was the result of my wife and I not being able to have children. It was a real crisis for our young marriage because being Hispanic, Latino, I really valued family. I value family. It's very important to me. My mom came from a family of 4 brothers and 4 sisters. And so I always imagined myself having a large family. So when I was given the news that we couldn't have family and also that it was what we call unexplained infertility. In other words, Laurel and I were both checked out, and the doctors couldn't pinpoint anything, which was really frustrating. Because if you can pinpoint a problem, you can try to solve it, right? So for many, many months, um, there was a lot of gloom and doom in my life.
Mm.
And I remember one particular afternoon, I was still teaching at Harvard. I was teaching physics at Harvard. I was at ABC News. I was their science editor. So I had a pretty good life. I mean, by anyone's reckoning. But I was going through this crisis, and I remember not sleeping well for weeks, months. I mean, I was just kind of the walking dead. And I had a conversation late one afternoon. The sun was going down with a pastor friend of mine, or a friend of the family who happened to be a pastor, is what I should say. It was a good friend of my dad's. And I think out of desperation, I just called him just to talk through my crisis and see if he could offer me any words of wisdom. I wasn't a Christian at that point. I was exploring the spiritual world. I talk about that in the movie and in my book. I started with Hinduism, but so after that conversation with my dad's friend, uh, he said something to me. I don't want to get into the details, but he said something that made me think. And as I hung up the phone, I just fell into bed. Richard, I was just dog tired. I was just spent. I was at the end of my rope. And as I fell into bed, I had a personal experience. I won't get into the details, but I'm almost reluctant to talk about it because I am a scientist, and it could sound very weird, but it was weird. It was a weird experience, and it was mostly a tactile experience. So it wasn't God's still small voice, but it was definitely an encounter, a divine encounter.
Mm-hmm.
Let's leave it at that. And as I fell into bed, for the first time in weeks, if not months, I slept like a baby that night. And when I woke up the following morning, I looked around. Nothing had really changed, but I felt like everything in my life had changed. And from that moment on, things began happening in my life, including adopting a beautiful boy who's now my son. I love him to death. He's the best son any father could ever hope for.
Mm.
So that wasn't a still small voice. On the other hand, yes, many years later, I did begin hearing God's voice. I won't get into them. I talk about them in the book.
Mm-hmm.
But and I can discern, Richard, I can discern when it's kind of me talking to myself versus God talking to me. And I actually had one such communication with regard to this movie. Again, it happened February 25th of last year, at 4 a.m. I just remember it like it was yesterday. February 25th, 4 a.m. I was still in bed. It was dark. My wife was still asleep. I wasn't thinking about the movie. I wasn't asking anything about the movie. I just had my whole body just resonated like an antenna. And I had this message from him. And that's what caused me to make this movie using AI. I was planning to make the movie like I did my last movie, in a traditional way. And Little Red Wagon was my last movie. It's distributed by Lionsgate. It's very traditional. It's now on Amazon. It went to theaters and Walmart and all the whole nine yards. Netflix, now it's on Amazon and Apple TV and Fandango and all over the. But this movie is different. And it was different because of that communication I heard from God last February 25th at 4 a.m. So I hope that answers your question. But yes, it's certainly not something that I would have expected, Richard, because I am first and foremost, I think, an intellectual. And I get your whole idea about being an agnostic. I hear that from a lot of people. And my Jewish brothers and sisters don't even like to spell the word God out. They leave the O out of God with a hyphen because it's their way of saying, I can never know God. I can never know God, so I shouldn't even be able to spell his name. I shouldn't even have the audacity of spelling out his name, G-O-D. So I get that. And I was that way. We all live by degrees of faith. When somebody says, are you a person of faith? The answer is absolutely yes for everybody. Everybody on planet Earth is a person of faith. The only difference is, what do you have faith in? And what degree do you have confidence in your faith? So we're all kind of groping in the dark. There's no proof, as I said earlier to you. The whole concept of proof, even in mathematics, we can get into that if you want. I get into that in my book, not so much in the movie. But even the concept of proof in mathematics is a fiction. You always have to have faith. Everything in life, now listen to me, everything in life is founded on faith. The question is, what faith do you have? In what do you have faith? And how certain are you about your faith? So yeah, you will get people who say, "No, I'm 100% certain." Well, that's a pretty good place to be. I would say I'm 99.999% because I guess it's because the intellectual in me, I'm going to allow for that tiny percentage of uncertainty because as you say, and as I'm telling you, you can't prove things in life. Very few things can be proved.
I think I took on that agnostic title, or at least that pronoun of sorts, when describing my faith and belief from Larry King, who, of course, that's where he came from. He would always tell people, he says, I'm not an atheist. No, I don't know. I'm an agnostic, and that to me is the definition of agnosticism is not knowing. But also, in an interview I did some time ago, we were chatting away, and the guest presented their particular perspective, and I says, okay, well, and then I shared my observations or my understanding of what he was saying, and he says, well, yeah, but, and when he was finished, as I'm listening to him, I said, for about 2-3 seconds of silence, I says, well, there goes another one of my straw huts up in flame, and I'm willing to burn them all to the ground and start over if that's what it takes to have a better understanding of who I am, where I am, why I'm here, where I'm going after this. I mean, there are people who are afraid of death, Michael, to the extent that they're afraid because they don't know what comes next. And when I talk to them, I say, okay, I can't tell you for certain what comes next. But what I can tell you is what I believe. And I'll share with them what I believe. And I'll say, and for me right now in my life, based upon what I have learned, the people I have communicated and talked with and had conversations with, the books I've read, the experiences that I have had, that's where I'm at. And best epitomized by something I said to my eldest sister years ago, that my beliefs of yesterday are not my beliefs of today, are not my beliefs of tomorrow. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges for a lot of folks is that when you adopt a philosophy, as I like to call them, we can call religions if you want, but I look at them more as philosophies. When you do adopt one, you have to keep your mind open to the possibility that this came some time ago and we're constantly discovering new writings for that matter. I mean, that's another interesting fact too. In the 20th century, long after Gutenberg printed the first Bible and we'd had it in various translations, they found more writings buried in a cave in a clay pot.
Yeah.
And some people, and then when they got them translated, some people accepted them, some people didn't. I have a wide variety of different writings. I like to call them ancient wisdom teachings, and from a wide variety of philosophies. I want to ask you when as we continue here, Michael, about that aspect of the things that really, shall we say, touched you and really sort of, I'm not sure if the right word is cemented per se, but at least codified for you the change in your personal philosophy from, we'll go ahead and use the term atheism, to a believer, to a person of faith, and we'll do that. Now, I'm going to ask you, I asked you before we started, I'm going to ask you again, the pronunciation, the correct, not the anglicized version, but the correct pronunciation of your last name, Michael, once again is?
Guillén.
It is
So
Guillén.
it's like, it's Guillén. You said it perfectly, Richard. And, there's a baseball player named Ozzie Guillén,
Mm-hmm.
or I'm not sure he's still alive. but it derives from the word guillotine. You can say guillotine or you can say guillotine. So it's
Hmm.
Guillén or you can say Guillen.
Hmm.
Interesting, when I started with Good Morning America, the producers asked me, how do you want your name to be pronounced, right? And Joan London and Charlie Gibson were the hosts at that time. And I thought to myself, well, you know, Guillen might be a hard thing for them to pronounce or remember. So I said to the producers, let's just go with Gillen. And it was shortly after I started appearing on Good Morning America. I was in Logan Airport in Boston, and this man came running up to me, and he said to me, "You're Michael Guillen, right? You're on Good Morning America." I said, "Yes, sir." I said, "Hey, how come that Joan is always talking to you about? Calls you Gillen?" And he says, "Aren't you Hispanic?" I said, "Yes, I am. I'm Mexican, Cuban, and Spanish." And he turns to his family, and says, "I told you, yeah, he's Latino. He's Latino." And now I feel so embarrassed and I'm ashamed of myself that I didn't stand up for my surname, but now I say unabashedly, and I appreciate your asking, Richard, and making a point of it. I know it's still hard for some people to pronounce, but it's a beautiful name, Guillen, and I'm
Well,
named after my grandfather. So
yeah. Well, I find it the height of disrespect, and I felt the same way back in '79, age 19, when the hostages were taken, and nobody could pronounce the name of the religious leader of Iran at that time. Uh, Khomeini. I mean, there were all so many different ways of pronouncing, or that people chose to pronounce it. And I don't care if the guy took, I forget how many hostages he took for 444 days. You know, you really want to add insult to injury? Mispronounce the guy's name. You really want to tick somebody off because some people take it very personally. I mean, it's a very important thing. So, from my perspective, to me, showing respect to one another, and that's one of the reasons why I don't get into the whole personal pronouns thing. I say, "What's your name?" Okay.
yeah,
I don't
right.
need the he, the she, the they, the we, the. What's your name? Let me address you by your name,
There you go.
and we'll
There
go
you
from
go.
there. And it's Dr. Michael Guillen, and we're going to talk more about this wonderful movie, this documentary that's available to you, The Invisible Everywhere. It is available on Venmo, and we hope that you will check it out as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Reverend Dr. D. He is Dr. Michael Guillen, and what is the doctor all about? Share with us that.
Well, when I went to grad school at Cornell, I had the intention of becoming an experimental high energy physicist. So that means, you study subatomic particles and so forth and so on. And without getting too far into the weeds, my interest broadened and began to include astronomy. Carl Sagan was actually one of my professors, and so was Frank Drake. And I was just captivated by the whole subject of astronomy, in particular cosmology, the study of the origins of the universe. And then as I began working on my thesis, I realized how deeply mathematical it was going to be. So I ended up having a PhD in physics, math, and astronomy. That's where the doctor comes from. And it's interesting because at the end of all the work you do, you take your coursework, you do your thesis, but at the end, you have this oral exam. And usually it's hours long. Mine was 4 hours long. And usually you have faculty on your committee, what's called thesis committee, and usually it's just restricted to the one discipline. But in my case, I had representatives on my committee from physics, astronomy, mathematics, and I even had somebody from electrical engineering, Professor Lieboff, who was professor of electrical engineering. And so, yeah, I call it a 3D PhD. I don't think Cornell has ever had anybody quite like me go through their curriculum. I think there were a lot of faculty who didn't quite get what I was trying to do, or were just actually trying to kick me out. They just didn't get me. And I'm so glad I stuck to my guns because I have a very broad appreciation for the universe that we live in, from the tiniest things to the largest things. And that informs this movie. And by the way, it's not on Vimeo, it's on theinvisibleeverywhere.com. You just go
Okay.
to theinvisibleeverywhere.com, and no matter who you are, where you are, whatever you believe, whatever you don't believe, just go to theinvisibleeverywhere.com and you can rent the movie, buy the movie, host a screening and so forth, just like a normal box office.
Yeah, that's very cool. First of all, I'm certainly happy that you are not the caustic atheist I recall from the 70s and 80s, Madeline Murray O'Hare. Now that woman, I think that she had some personal issues that she needed to deal with. Now, whether or not she became a believer or not was not relevant, but she always seemed to be so angry. I remember seeing her on Johnny Carson, and she wasn't bad there. She kind of was low key, but most of the stuff that I used to hear, especially when working at the Christian radio station, and they would play little excerpts of her, I mean, I remember there was the whole business of being so upset over the fact that when we would launch the Apollo rockets, then they would say Godspeed. Oh, it's just incensed her. It was like foul language that she could not handle, and it's like, lighten up, lady. I mean, you want to know something? I would actually be upset over using the phrase Godspeed instead of some of the Old Testament terms or words for God, like Elohim speed. And so forth. And then, of course, the accurate pronunciation of the carpenter 2,000 years ago was not Jesus. It was Yeshua HaMashiach. That was the correct pronunciation. And I've heard some different stories lately about how Jesus actually refers to something other than. In other words, it's not, it's all of that business. But
Richard,
yes, go ahead, please, go ahead.
Because I think that makes a good point. It's kind of sad to me to hear from atheists who are just seem to be always angry. I mean, I hear from them on my social media. I mean, they just go over the deep end, and I just wonder, well, what did I say? I mean, all I said was that science shattered my atheism and opened my eyes to the existence of God. That's a factual statement.
Yeah.
Why should that bother you? Why should that infuriate you to the point where all you want to do is insult me? And I don't reply in anger. I just say, you can do better, my fellow traveler, because I see them as my fellow travelers. Where I get, and this gets back to the agnosticism that you embrace, and I understand where you're coming from. We even the Bible says, even now we look through a glass darkly, and we have to have humility about that. But I will say to my fellow atheists, I was a former atheist, but I call them my fellow travelers, because I do acknowledge the fact that we are all traveling this journey called life, and we are surrounded by these invisible realities. And so, naturally, there's going to be room for disagreement. But do we have to be foul-mouthed about it? Do we have to be angry about it? I'm not angry that you're an atheist. I don't hate you because you're an atheist. I don't want to change your mind. This movie that I made, there's not a single preaching word. I'm just telling you my story. This is my journey, one man's journey. I'm not out to, I don't lose any sleep over what you believe or you don't believe. Now, it may sound harsh, but I really don't. I don't feel like, even I say this to my Gen Z son, I say, son, you are an autonomous individual. God made you to be you. I'm not going to tell you what to believe. Why would I have that kind of audacity, even though I'm your father? Why would I take on that authority to tell you what to believe? It took me decades to believe what I believe. So now I can tell you what I believe and why I believe it. I just feel sad for atheists who Richard Dawkins is another one. It's like, can you just take a deep breath, brother? I mean, I don't hate you for being an atheist, but he's red in the face and his eyes are puffing out and the blood vessels in his temples are it's like, calm down, man. It's like, why are you so troubled? It's almost like you picture, I love the old Dracula movies, the 1930 version. And I know you love vintage, Richard, so I'm talking your language, but I love those old 1931 Frankenstein and Dracula. And it's with some of these atheists, it's almost like you're showing them the cross. And you remember when you showed the cross to Dracula, he'd just like freak out, he'd flip out. Just calm. We can all live in peace. You believe what you believe. I believe what I believe. I'm okay with what you believe. I don't feel like an evangelist. I don't call myself a Christian apologist.
Yeah.
I'm one guy. I'm a scientist whose eyes were opened by the evidence to the existence of God. End of story. That's it. Full stop. That shouldn't disturb you. It's just like, good Lord.
Yeah. Well, this movie, this documentary was created in a very unique way, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm going to tell you folks, who have not heard the interview that I did with a gentleman not long ago, he's an author. He writes his books, and he uses AI to write his books. But here's the deal. First of all, at the beginning of the interview, Michael, I told the audience I have a bias against AI. And
Yeah.
I think that it's a mistake based upon what I knew at the time. But maybe our guest can help me through that bias. And he did, because this is how he explained it. He says, this is how I use AI to write my fictional books. AI writes the first and only draft. I then take it, and then I, like a sculptor hammering away at a block of marble, AI creates the block of marble, and I hammer away those things that are not part of the story. And
Beautiful.
with that, I thought, okay, it is nothing more than a tool. All right.
Yeah.
So people, now,
Yeah.
and I'll add to that, believe it or not, and on the day that you and I are conversing, it's tax day.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, I used AI, Chat GPT, to do my taxes. Did
There you
it
go.
do my taxes? No, not really. But I could ask questions. It would access the instructions that I didn't have to flip through or click through to try to find the answers I was looking for. And so I went through and I did the math and on and on and on. And that's, believe it or not, for the first time in my life, I actually, instead of using TurboTax or H&R Block or whoever it is, I used AI, because it's a
And
tool.
it is. I'm so glad you raised this question because, honestly, when I wrote the script to my movie and I wrote it, I didn't have AI write it. I've never had AI write my stuff. I've
Hmm.
always written my own stuff. I'm old school that way. So when I wrote the script for Believing is Seen, or for The Invisible Everywhere, Believing is Seen, about 2, 3 years ago, again, my intention was, rinse and repeat. I'll do for this movie what I did for Little Red Wagon. Little Red Wagon cost me about $8 million. I had a celebrity director, David Anspaugh, who did Rudy and Hoosiers and a bunch of other movies. And then I had a really good screenwriter. And then I had about 200 crew members. I had actors and actresses, crew members. We shot it in Charleston, South Carolina. Took me about 5 years to make that movie. We came out in the theaters in 2010. Then Walmart wanted to buy it. I went to the bestseller list as DVDs, and then Netflix, and now, as I said, Amazon Prime, Fandango, et cetera, et cetera. So I thought with The Invisible Everywhere, fine, rinse and repeat. This is what I'm going to do again. But then I had, this download, this calling that I felt February 25th of last year at 4 in the morning. And God basically said, look, I don't want you to go the normal route. I'm paraphrasing. This is
Hmm.
not how I heard it. But he basically said, no, I don't want you to do that. I don't want you to wait. I just do it, even if you have to do it now, even if you have to do it with your iPhone. That was it.
Hmm.
And I was just so thunderstruck. It's like, what? This like came out of nowhere. As I said, I wasn't even thinking about the movie. I wasn't worrying about the movie. It just like boom out of nowhere. And so I told my wife, I said, oh, wow, okay, well, I guess I have to get a new iPhone. Let's get some cameras, some extra cameras, lights, green screen. We were tooling up. And then I noticed as I was surfing on the web, I noticed these AI video generators. A year ago, believe it or not, they were brand new. Just a year ago, but it could have been ages ago in terms of the technology. And Runway was really the only AI generator at the time. I experimented. I started by taking one line from my script, and I thought, okay, well, let me try it out. I'm a scientist, I do experiments. So I fed it a line from my script, and boom, it came out with a little 5-second video. And I thought, well, it's not everything I want it to be, but man. And so it placed an idea in my head. And as I experimented more and more, I reached a point where I said, you know what? I think I can do this.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm told that I am the first person in history, and I'm told by good authorities that I'm the first person in history to make a full-length motion picture by myself on my desktop using publicly available AI tools. Now, people have made short movies. That's no big deal. They make 5-10 minute movies. I did an 80-minute movie. Now, apropos of what this man that you just were talking about, that you interviewed about the fiction book, people will say, oh, well, all you did was prompt. No, no, no. I worked 12. Richard, listen to me. I worked 12-hour days for an entire year, solid, 6 days a week, 12-hour days. My wife would peek into my office and she would say, eat, you're not eating. And I told her, I think I'm reverting back to my scientific monk days when I was at Cornell, except I'm not a kid anymore. But literally, because when you watch the movie, you'll see I literally pieced together an 80-minute movie, 5 seconds at a time. But I had to have music. I had to have sound effects. I had the narration I had to record. Then I had to blend it all in. And sometimes I had to prompt the AI generators, 10, 15, 20 times before it caught my vision. Sometimes it would not only catch my vision, but it would take my vision to the next level. So I actually came to see the AI generators as my collaborator. When I make a movie a traditional way, I collaborate with human artists. Here I'm collaborating with a machine. It's an alien form of intelligence. But people will say, well, but you're stealing. No, I'm not stealing anybody. Look, we just got something in the mail from Anthropic because there's a class action suit against Anthropic because there's copyright infringement. Because I've written a lot of books, and all the AI generators out there have actually trained on my books. They've trained on my movie. They've trained on my stuff on TV. I've spent a lifetime on television. They've trained on all of that. So I'm going to be entitled. I'll probably end up getting a check for $100 or something, because it's a class.
Yeah, the lawyers get the big part.
Right? You know how these class action suits work.
Mm-hmm.
So look, I'm fully aware. What I'm saying to you is I'm fully aware of the dark side of AI.
Sure.
But there's nothing dark about my movie. My movie is beautiful visually, and the music is beautiful. And I'm saying that because we're getting reviews now from people who've seen it. This is not just me. They're saying it's magnificent, it's mind-boggling, it's transcendent. It's all of those things. I put my heart and soul into that movie.
Yeah.
That was hard to do. Actually, it was harder to make Invisible Everywhere than it was Little Red Wagon the conventional way, because I had 200 people helping me to make that movie. But this one I made all by myself, and I poured my heart and soul into it. So, and it glorifies God. I mean, by just my telling my story about how science shattered my atheism and opened my eyes to the existence of God. There's nothing dark about it. It's beautiful, and I'm proud of it.
It's interesting that science has gotten some people into trouble, in particular, some notable individuals. Oh, I don't know, like Copernicus, who basically discovered that, oops, the Earth isn't the center of the universe, nor is the sun. And I was just reading, someone had sent me some information regarding the speed at which the Earth spins, and then the speed at which the Earth rotates around the sun, and then the speed at which the sun moves around in its arm of the Milky Way galaxy, as we call it, and then the speed at which the Milky Way galaxy is moving through the universe. And I'm sitting here going, should I be holding on to something? Because we're moving awful fast. But the point
add
was,
to that, the speed at which the universe is expanding.
Expanding,
so please continue.
it's just amazing. And one of the things, the points that they made was that they were talking about how, we sent those 4 astronauts around the moon and back again. Well, believe it or not, we're all astronauts, and that's when they went through the list of the speeds at which we're traveling on this spaceship we call Earth, or Terra, if you will. So we're all traveling.
I love that. You know what? I love that image. I'd never heard that before.
Yeah.
I love that image, Richard. I'm going to steal it from you.
Hey, you're going to be stealing it from someone else, because I took it from them. But it's to me, and by the way, I co-host a program called Skyview with a gentleman I've known for 20, 30 years. His name is Steve Cates, Dr. Sky.
I know. I was actually on his show.
Oh, wonderful.
For 2 hours in the middle of the night.
Oh, well, I'll tell you what. I've actually been on his program with him, conversing with his guests, such as yourself. And we talk about, of course, his realms of astronomy, space, aviation, and weather. We've been doing that now for like 3 or 4 years. And yet we've known each other much longer than that, going back to when I was in Phoenix back in the in 2000, 2001, and so forth, and even before that. And to me, it's fascinating the things that come to mind, and this is kind of where I want to go with this next little piece here. But first, I want to remind you that you're listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story: New Paradigms for a New World. We are here with Dr. Michael Guillén. I am Reverend Dr. D. This is Tell Me Your Story. Space is a place where we happen to reside in the universe, which, for all we know, there are multiple universes. They call them the multiverse. They call it the multiverse because we just don't know. Multiple timelines, multiple dimensions. And the imagination just goes crazy. This is what's interesting. You know, you talk about science, and I'm a big science fiction fan. I mean, one of my favorite books that I read years ago, I bought the book, the paperback version, and it was already real thick, called Stranger in a Strange Land.
Oh, yes.
Also read another book by the author of Dune, Frank Herbert, who wrote another book before Dune, I think, called The Prometheus Project. It was one that I could not put down. It was also paperback, but it was one of those smaller ones, but it was a thick one. Now, I had to use a magnifying glass to read. So imagine trying to hold the book with one hand and keep the page open, and then trying to read with the other, and so forth. In any event, one of the things that we have discovered as human beings over the years, as books are being written, especially science fiction, is how science fiction somewhere down the road in the timeline becomes science fact. Look at all of the inventions we have today that you could put to Star Trek, the original series, and then Next Generation, etc. That one genre, if you will. So I'm curious as to where you, what you think in that regard to how, when individuals write these science fiction stories, first of all, where those ideas come from. I have a good friend who has a wonderful analogy using the Empire State Building, and that the imagination is basically at the top of that Empire State Building with the lightning rod and the radio tower up there. And then when a lightning bolt hits it, boom, there's the inspiration for the story, which means it doesn't come necessarily from that individual, even though that individual is sort of the conduit for that idea. So I'm curious as to, when it comes to science, and let's say you have a theory that you want to prove, all right? You get an inspiration. You get inspired to want to investigate that theory to see if it can be proven. And maybe today it can't be, but because we don't have the tools to measure. What are your thoughts in that regard, specifically in terms of being inspired, and maybe where that comes from, how you have been inspired? Because I do have to believe, just again myself, is your atheism was part of your path. You had to go through that to get where you are today.
Yes, I agree. I'm loving our conversation, by the way, Richard. I appreciate your deep thoughts, and I love the way your mind works. So let me just say that for the record. I wrote a book, actually, I think it was my very first book. It was called Bridges to Infinity, The Power and Poetry of, Bridges to Infinity, The Human Side of Mathematics. That was my very first book. I had just gotten to Harvard. So this was like in the 80s. I was a young man still, and got a great review from Christopher Lehman Haupt at the New York Times, just raved about it. And then it was reviewed by all the major newspapers, LA Times, Washington Post. They all loved it. The reason I bring this up, Bridges to Infinity, I talked in there about mathematics, because a lot of what you're asking bears on mathematics. When I do mathematics, where are those ideas coming from? And I quote Plato. Plato had a concept called the principle of plenitude. I'm pretty sure my recollection is correct here, but Plato stated the principle of plenitude this way. Basically, and I'm paraphrasing, but he basically said the human imagination is actually a form of perception. In other words, a lot of people will say, well, where does creativity come from? Because that's the gist of your question. Where does creativity come from? When that lightning bolt strike, where do those ideas come from? Where do they reside? Are we just inventing them out of whole cloth, or are we receiving them from some larger source? And so one of the things that I talked about in that book, Bridges to Infinity, is how does that bear on mathematics? In other words, is mathematics a mere human invention, or is mathematics a form of perception? I don't know where I come down on that. I'm still thinking that through, but the older I get, Richard, the more I believe that the human imagination is a form of perception. And especially when we dream, and I talk about this in the movie, I talk about the human mind. I talk about how the human mind is non-physical. The brain is physical. It's between our two ears. But what about our mind? Where is our mind located? Where do these ideas come from? Where do they reside once we receive those ideas? These are very deep questions, but I feel like even when you're dreaming, when you shut out the physical world and you're fully immersed in the world of the mind, this non-physical world of the mind, so many ideas come to you then. And I think that it has something to do with what I'm talking about, this principle of plenitude, that the human imagination is a form of perception. So that when we get an idea, it's because we're perceiving something that's true. Now, we may get that idea before it's time, before we actually go out there and discover it. But I think many times that's what happens, that somebody will imagine something, they'll have a lightning bolt moment, like H.G. Wells or any of these people that you're talking about, who wrote these incredible science fiction and were almost perceiving the future. It was almost as if they were receiving ideas that were coming to them from the future. Anyway, I take all that very seriously because as a scientist, I know that the subject of time, past, present, and future, is very, very complicated. We are not even close to understanding that.
Now, I will just say very quickly here, because we're just about out of time, that I know there are those who believe that mathematics is the communication tool of the universe. I disagree. I will say, based upon, for example, the very beginning of Genesis, in the beginning was the word, or if you want to translate it more loosely, sound. Okay? Sound, vibration. In the beginning was vibration. Now, it can be mathematically equated, but the reality is, in my conversations with my good friend Jonathan Goldman, who has been involved with sound for decades, we talk about his World Sound Healing Day every 14th of February. That to me is the beginning of everything, is sound, and even though out in space, you can't hear anything because there's no atmosphere to bounce those molecules off of, the vibrations. But it's fascinating.
Well, can I just say, because
please
I know
go
we're
ahead.
wrapping up, but I just a final thought on that, because
Sure.
I think that's a fascinating train of thought. I've also found it fascinating that God spoke the universe into existence. There again, this notion of vibrations, right? Well, I also find interesting that string theory envisions the universe as being consisting not of elementary particles, but of vibrating strings. So there again, the vibrations.
Yeah.
So I think we keep coming back, even in modern science, we keep coming back to this notion that the most fundamental things about the universe are vibrations. So anyway, we don't have time to get into it deeply,
Right.
but I just wanted to throw that out there.
Right.
But thank you, Richard.
Michael Guillén, my guest, Dr. Michael Guillén. I'm Reverend Dr. D. This is Tell Me Your Story. We are just about out of time, and Michael, I cannot thank you enough. I want to have you back to continue this conversation because there are so many other questions, not only in terms of what the PR firm sent, but also in my own mind. And by the way, just so you know, the universe asks these questions. I'm just along for the ride. I want you to know that. But I thank you so much for being along for the ride and look forward to have you riding with us again here on Tell Me Your Story.
I look forward to it. Richard, thank you so much for your time. and for your thoughtful conversation. I really appreciate it. God bless you.
I do have 3 final questions that I want to ask you. I ask all of my guests. Before I do that, I want to thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story. New paradigms for a new world, giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m., and Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m., streaming live at all 9 times at richarddugan.com. With podcasts on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and we're on YouTube and Rumble, and we hope you'll subscribe and click notification. Please get a copy of my book, Choices, 5 Steps for Life, and it is available in hardcover, paperback, and Kindle. And we also hope that you can leave us a tip. We have a PayPal account. That's our tip jar, believe it or not. Put in my email address if you can support us financially. We'd be so grateful if you did. And a thank you to those who have helped and to those who will help. And finally, I'll repeat it. We hope that you will spend some time going within during this decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, and listening to and following the promptings of that still small voice. And with all of that, we move to our final 3 questions for our very special guest. The first of which is, who is Michael Guillén?
That little Mexican kid from East LA who was filled with a dream to become a scientist and ended up having a journey in life he could have never imagined.
What gets you up in the morning?
My work, serving the Lord, just sharing my journey with others. I guess if just put it in secular terms, just sharing my journey with others. That's it. I'm not trying to persuade anybody, just sharing my journey with others.
And finally, maybe you'll get this movie reference. What was your best day?
When I married my wife.
Well, Michael.
And no, I have to say,
go ahead.
And a close second was when we adopted our son. So those are the 2 best days of my life.
Excellent.
Marrying my wife and adopting my boy. Best
Well,
days
Michael,
of my life.
Once again, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you folks for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story. And until our next broadcast, podcast, videocast, love Talal. Jeanette, I'm still listening. Dad, continue to be happy because I am. Smokey, I'll see you on the other side. Mike, thanks for being in my life and letting me be in yours. And to my dear friend Zorro, aho, aho.